You ever have those days where you think there's way too many games to play, and not just because you got them on your backlog, but because there's a new game releasing basically every single day or week that you're looking forward to? That's what happened to me recently with the May of 2024, a new interesting indie game coming out every 3 days, sometimes even on the very same day. Most of these titles could even deserve their own video, and maybe I should have done that because I never have a clue how to make a thumbnail for a video where I cover a whole bunch of games that are completely different from each other. I don't want to blabber too much more though, so let me introduce you to some of my favorites from this month, and there are obviously way more, but I can't cover them all. I have to warn you, if you ever thought that Undertale is too quirky for you, then you better never ever touch Athenian Rhapsody, because you will most likely end up having a stroke, and not the good kind. It cranks up the quirkiness levels of Undertale to 100%. Imagine if every single character in Undertale was like Tammy. That's basically what you have to deal with here. In a parallel universe, this could have been the actual Undertale with how much everything in this game reminded me of it, which is both good but also bad. Without spoiling anything, you end up in a world that isn't really yours. Sounds familiar, yeah? Now you meet two guys, one of them being big and the other one being smaller, and one of them loves to make puzzles. I wonder where I have seen that before. Then you get to fight and the game tells you you can actually spare the monsters by doing certain actions. You don't have to kill. Do I even have to say what it reminded me of? And that's just the first 20 minutes. There were so many moments that just made me think, wowie, this is just like Undertale. Or that is like Undertale, yippee, Undertale reference, wowies, this is like Undertale. Everything reminds me of her. I feel a bit bad describing it like this, but I can't help myself. Despite that, I still enjoyed it because I love these kind of combat systems, and you can make lots of friends on your Rhapsody. Most of the time I use Catgirl though, because she's a sarcastic catgirl fed up with her life as a catgirl that has to work at an arcade. And I mean, I'm a big Nier fan, so it just fit. People who need an Undertale fix could maybe risk a look if you can stomach the most quirky game of the year. I mean, just looking at the trailer will most likely tell you if you can survive it or not. The soundtrack is totally amazing though, even if you may hate the game. I still enjoyed it for the fun combat and the way it made me feel like my brain is slowly rotting away, at least the part I still had of it. I personally don't trust anyone wearing a mullet nowadays, especially if they also got a really badly looking mustache. Different story for video games though. Mullet MADJACK is like a playable 90s anime OVA full of brutality, some cute anime babes, and a protagonist who is actually pretty damn manly and just wants to destroy some billionaires to get a pair of fresh sneakers. It plays in a dystopian future where people really love to see murder and things like that, and to a degree that's pretty cool, but I have to say I don't actually mean that, or else people will think I'm weird. The thing is, if you bore the audience, you will be the one dying. So you gotta shoot your way through floors of enemies and kick them into big ventilators to shred them to pieces, because the more brutal the better. So make sure to aim for the heads, not just lowly body shots, even though the game has a perk where you get extra seconds for shooting people into their nuts. If you're not entertaining for a whole 10 seconds, then it's game over, because there's just not enough dopamine. You gotta be groovy and cool, not lame like a grandma, despite grandmas being cool too, sometimes. After every floor you can choose a new upgrade or weapon, but if you die, you have to do all of those floors again and lose them. Every 10 floors you get a boss and it also gets saved. You don't need to do every floor in the game in one big rush, unless you play endless mode. The bosses are a bit of a letdown except for the final boss, but overall it's just a really fun game. You can go pew pew and just get rid of everything in your path with a sick art style. What's not to love about that? Hauntii is a game about haunting, since you're a little ghost and can possess things, but I like to think it's called like this because it's hauntingly beautiful. All of this is hand-drawn and it's just like, wow. It's somewhat of a twin-stick shooter, adventure, puzzler, because with the left stick you walk and with the right stick you shoot your shots. The typical twin-stick controls, but most of those games focus on combat, which isn't really the case here. It's more about the puzzling aspect, and those puzzles consist of you possessing different things to then control them to clear out the way. You're also creating a path, because if you stay too far in the darkness, they will get you. Luckily, you're not alone. Now it's up to you and your friend to find out who you are, or also who your friend is. Why are you a ghost? Can you trust this angel? What happened in your past? The game just absolutely had me hooked after the first 10 minutes. It's clever, it looks stunning, and the music is just also wow. I don't even want to say too much more about it, but I will leave you alone for a tiny bit with the scenery, and if you think this is totally up your alley, then you need to get it. I'm not kidding when I say this is an actual Game of the Year contender for me. I got goosebumps when I walked here and the music set in. Let's be honest, theme parks are some of the coolest locations in any video game. And not just in video games, but also in real life. I really just love them. Crow Country is a homage to the old Resident Evil style of survival horror. Sadly, survival is pretty damn easy in this one, which also lowers the horror aspect a tiny little bit if that even existed in the first place. Just look at the game, it's way too cute to be scary, even the monsters are adorable, for the most part. The whole aesthetic of the game is basically cute horror, if that's a name for that genre of horror. That does not make the game bad though, the opposite of it. It has its own touch, even if you may feel like you're just playing a cutesified version of Resident Evil 1. You walk around, shoot monsters, but try to not shoot them too much because you may run out of ammo and have really bad memories of playing Resident Evil 1 and basically making the game unbeatable for me unless I would have learned how to use the knife to perfection, and it scarred me to probably the end of my life, but made me learn not to waste anything in life. Here, that wasn't the case though, because it was just way too easy to avoid monsters and there was plenty of ammo. They recently added a hard mode though, so I would most likely recommend to play it with that on. Sadly, it did not exist yet when I first played through the game. And the puzzles are also pretty neat, but a bit too easy too, and I don't think those get changed in the hard mode. I wish more games would have a puzzle difficulty like the Silent Hill games, even though then I would never be able to pass through them if I would play the puzzles on hard. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, but that's not always something a game has to do. Sometimes a game can just be a fun game without having to do anything special. It's a perfect game for people who maybe want to get into horror games and people who want to scratch that itch of classic Resident Evil games. I'm talking about scratching an itch today, maybe a little bit too much. I hate being itchy. Luckily there's like no more mosquitoes anymore where I live. Not sure if that's a good thing though, because normally when an insect dies out it's a bad thing for the ecosystem, but I haven't studied biology, so what do I know? I know, 2D Zelda likes are everywhere nowadays, but rarely do they make me feel like there's something that makes me go, this is more than the typical Zelda clone. You play as a little fox, I'm not a furry, and get thrown into the world here, which makes you think you're right at home if you love Link's Awakening. What I love about the game is that it feels so open and how little it holds your hand. There's no dialogue in the game pretty much, even the characters just talk to you in little smileys. The first dungeon already made me scratch my head a bit, but that was mostly because I was really damn stupid, and sometimes I love it when games make me feel stupid. If you're on the hunt for a really charming and cute Zelda-like, then you need to get this. It's really just the perfect game to scratch that Zelda itch whenever you get it, since it's a total love letter to the franchise, at least the old ones. Sometimes you need some good old Unity slop in your life, which means a game that is totally broken and held together by glue, and that it's also mostly created by using different Unity marketplace assets that they bought or found for free, which isn't always a bad thing. It gives everyone a chance to be able to make a game, which is pretty neat. You are a little girl with her plushies and your mission is to get to the moon, which is exactly way too many meters away. You do that by flying around the levels, beating up baddies with your plushies and using the extremely broken dodge mechanic, and also Naruto running. The levels themselves are mostly kinda whatever. There's secrets to be found, enemies to be fought, and puzzles to be solved, such as bullying turtles and pushing them into a hole so they activate wind. Don't ask me how that works. Somehow the movement in the game is just fun to mess around with because you can fly and also fly again with your broken dodge mechanic because you can just dodge in the air endlessly till your stamina is gone and it kind of refreshes itself and it's crazy. What kept me going the whole time though were the bosses. I don't care if they were bought assets, but they were just so over the top and so stupid that I enjoyed my time with them. The Troll King can't handle his own high speed and just bugs out the whole time during his fight and falls off the stage. To totally troll you since he's the Troll King and he is just now the Troll King Plus. And that time when you beat him, you actually get to finish him off by punching him where it hurts the most. You know what. It's a total shitpost of a game, but in a good way since I kept playing it till I beat it, and it unironically has some amazing bosses like the pissed Sleepywood. I just really love huge bosses, and I love the aesthetic of the fight with all the clouds around you. The older God of War games have nothing on this. Also you have a recover ability and it's you just going to bed really quickly. It's an experience I would recommend to people who think this is the type of game. But if you don't like bad games that are kinda so bad they actually become amazing, don't do it. One of the more fresh Metroidvanias I have played in a while. Recently I just got kinda sick of them because they all start feeling the same, which isn't always a bad thing except for when nothing feels new. They got the same kind of combat, the same kind of abilities to unlock, and they're just fine, nothing special. Is Animal well special? I would say so, even though I wouldn't describe it as this life-changing experience that others call it. You're a tiny blob that awakes here in the well and you can guess what lives down here in the well. Animals. Can you find an escape, or are you gonna be stuck here forever? That's for you to find out. What makes it so special for me is that you don't get the typical abilities like a double jump or being able to dash, but instead you get items such as the frisbee that you can throw to distract enemies with, or you can also jump on it to fly around with it. There's a sploinky that you can use to activate switches with, and way more creative things than most other Metroidvanias, since it's just not the typical kind of it. Another thing I love about the game is that you don't have to be a big brain person to beat the game and find a lot of X, which are the collectibles in the game that unlock some fun stuff. Everyone can beat the game normally, but the true game really starts after beating it, since it has so many secrets that are impossible to find out on your own, which is also a bit of a bad point of it. They're the kind of secrets that need a whole community to figure them out together, and if you start playing this game when the hype is gone and done, all you can really do is just look up some clues or hints and try to figure it out by yourself, which will be extremely hard. I looked at some of them and never ever would have figured those out. I mean, I'm not the brightest candle on the cake, but maybe if you play it and hit a roadblock and decide to look them up for yourself, you will see what I mean. Which is just great. You, as a normal person, can have fun with the game, even if you're not the next Albert Einstein. But if you want to delve into the mysteries of the game, then you better study it for 12 years at some university. Rabbit and Steel combines two of my favorite things, rabbits and bullet hells, and it's also a roguelike, which I also like, so it's actually three things. You have a bunch of different classes to choose from, and then it's a bullet hell game where you have to do your best to avoid damage and deal as much damage as you can, which is pretty damn hard. Luckily, there's the cute difficulty for people who need it. And that will maybe sound like some kind of gatekeeper, but bullet hell games kinda have to be a bit hard for me. Not too hard since I'm not the god gamer, but I want to fail over and over in learning a boss's pattern, and if it's too easy, it doesn't give the satisfaction that I need and that I seek for. It's neat that it exists though, because maybe people will play it on cute and then get a taste of it and try it on normal and then on hard and even lunatic. At first it seems pretty simple, gotta avoid lines, circles, the typical things you have to avoid in an MMO raid, because that's what the game calls itself. An MMO raid boss simulator kind of experience, and it even has co-op if you have friends, unlike me. The further you get into the game, the harder the mechanics become, such as getting teleported around and trying to avoid getting teleported into a projectile, or a bunch of clones appearing and they will all move into a different direction and you're gonna find out where to stay to not get cleaved. You will die a bunch of times, but the more you play, the more you get used to it, just like in any other roguelike. After some battles you also get treasures with items in them that change the way you play, and especially since there's also different classes such as assassin or mage. Mages having more range, while assassins kinda have to get close. Just an overall cute and great game for people who love bullet hells, but also for people who maybe always wanted to get into them but are way too afraid because they can look really damn hard. Play this and then start with Toho if you want more bullet hells with cute anime girls. Nine Souls has been a game I was looking towards since I played the demo at the Steam Next Fest like 2 years ago and got hooked on its parry system because it's basically Sekiro as a 2D game. It has everything you would want, a grappling hook, a cool fox character with a katana, gore, fun movement, and a fairly hard difficulty because you will get your butt kicked if you don't get used to parrying perfectly with tons of enemies on the screen, cause sometimes it felt really overwhelming to have two guys shoot at you while two other enemies try to dash attack you and you need to parry them all or try to dash through, and parry system for me always kind of work the best in 1v1 situations, and if I have to parry like 4 things coming at me, it's like, whoa, that's maybe too many people. I'm antisocial. Earlier, I complained about how most Metroidvanias are lacking for me recently, and at its core, it's kinda the typical Metroidvania 2 without doing anything original except on putting its focus mostly on parrying, but sometimes it just hits the spot because of the whole aesthetic of the game. It has its own style and isn't just playing in some old ruins or castles, which you almost always get to see in others that try to mimic 2D Souls-likes. Which just makes me want to play more and more because I want to see more locations. Sometimes the aesthetic really just makes the whole difference. And those were just a few. I didn't even include something like Hades 2 since that's already popular enough, or silly games such as Little Kitty Big City or this and that. Indie games have been on the rise for a long time already, but this month was just exploding with games everywhere. I really wish they would slow down a tiny bit again. Need more time to play video games. Good thing I don't have a social life, or else it would be even worse. With that said, I hope I could interest you in even 1 or 2 games like a good salesman. I'm doing all of this for free. I hope you enjoyed the video and have a good day, or good night, and anything that fits your time zone. Bye bye.